Thank you for coming back. In the reading of the Noble Eightfold Path, Chapter 5, Right Effort. In the previous introduction that we read, we mentioned a simile of the three boys representing concentration, right effort, and right mindfulness. And they had a desire to pick the flowers of this tree, but they couldn't reach the tree. And so they had to climb on each other's backs to get to the flowers. Eventually they managed to pick the flowers. It's a great simile, one to remember. And so the nature of the mental process effects a division of right effort into four great endeavors. So we're going to embark on the reading of the four great endeavors. The Buddha calls it endeavors. And the first endeavor is to prevent the arising of unarisen, unwholesome states. Prevent the arising of unwholesome, prevent the arising of unarisen, that which hasn't been arisen, unwholesome states. Herein the disciple rouses his will to avoid the arising of evil, unwholesome states that have not yet arisen, and he makes effort, stirs up his energy, exerts his mind, and strives. That's the effort. So, the first side of right effort aims at overcoming unwholesome states, states of mind tainted by defilements and delusions that have not yet arisen. Insofar as they impede concentration, and defilements are usually presented in a five-fold set called the five hindrances. Sensual drive, ill will, dullness, drowsiness, restlessness, and worry, and doubt. These are the five hindrances. These are the five that hinder our ability to concentrate. The five hindrances. I wonder why we can't achieve a peaceful mind. Why we can't fall asleep in a hurry? Why do we have to twist and turn all the time? Well, it's these five hindrances that have an effect on the mind. And so we're going to investigate these five hindrances and the great endeavors, and to prevent the arising of unarisen, unwholesome states. So how good is that? And so here we go. They receive the name hindrances because they block the path to liberation. Our aim is to be liberated. But these five hindrances block the path to achieving liberation. They grow up and over the mind, preventing calm and insight, the primary instruments for progress. The first two hindrances, sensual desire and ill will, those are the first two hindrances, are the strongest of the set of five. the most formidable barriers to meditative growth, representing respectively the unwholesome roots of greed and aversion. The other three hindrances, less toxic but still obstructive, are offshoots of delusion, using an association with other defilements. Sensual desire. We'll speak of sensual desire first. Because sensual desire and ill will are the two strongest hindrances that affect us in achieving a higher state in our pathway to being liberated. Sensual desire is interpreted in two ways. Sometimes it is understood in a narrow sense as lust for the 5 strands of sense pleasure. That is, agreeable sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and touches. Sometimes a broader interpretation is given, by which the term becomes inclusive of craving in all its modes, whether for sense pleasures, wealth, power, position, fame, or anything else. It can settle upon this essential desire. The second hindrance, ill will, is a synonym for aversion. It comprises hatred, anger, resentment, repulsion of every shade, whether directed towards other people, towards oneself, towards objects, or towards situations. The third hindrance, dullness and drowsiness, is a compound of 2 factors linked together by their common feature of mental unwieldiness. This is dullness. This is dullness and hindrance, dullness and drowsiness. You wonder why you become dull. You wonder why are you drowsy? It's probably your diet or what you're addicted to, or whatever's affecting your well-being. One is dullness. Thina. The word thina is the Pali word for dullness. Manifest as mental inertia. The other is drowsiness. Midda. Midda is a Pali word for drowsiness. Seen in mental sinking, heaviness of mind, or excessive inclination to sleep. Excessive inclination to sleep. Get away from reality. At the opposite extreme is the fourth hindrance. Restlessness is the fourth hindrance. Restlessness and worry. This too is a compound with its 2 members linked by their common feature of disquietude. Linked by their common feature of disquietude of the mind. Restlessness, uddaka, which is the Pali word for it, restlessness, is agitation or excitement, which drives the mind from thought to thought with speed and frenzy. Worry, kukkuka, is the Pali word for it, is remorse over past mistakes and anxiety about their possible undesired consequence. The fifth hindrance, doubt. The doubt is the fifth hindrance. Signifies a chronic indecisiveness and lack of resolution, not the probing of critical intelligence, an attitude encouraged by the Buddha, but a persistent inability to commit oneself to the cause of spiritual training due to lingering doubts concerning the Buddha, his doctrine, and his path. Yeah. That's an hindrance. Doubt. Doubting the Buddha's knowledge. Many people doubt the knowledge. Many people doubt the Buddha's knowledge. But that's a hindrance. It's a hindrance. The first effort to be made regarding the hindrances is the effort to prevent the unarisen hindrances from arising. This is also called the endeavor to restrain. The effort to hold the hindrances in a check is imperative both at the start of meditative training and throughout the course of its development. For when the hindrances arise, they disperse attention and darken the quality of awareness to the detriment of calm and clarity. The hindrances do not come from outside the mind, but from within. They appear through the activation of certain tendencies constantly lying dormant in the deep recess of the mental continuum, awaiting the opportunity to surface. They're just sitting there in the mind and they're waiting for an opportunity to surface. These 5 hindrances. Generally, what sparks the hindrances into activity is the input afforded by sense experience. The physical organism is equipped with 5 sense faculties, each receptive to its own specific kind of data. The eye to forms, the ear to sounds, the nose to smells, the tongue to tastes, the body to tangibles. Hence, objects continuously impinge on the senses, which relay the information they receive to the mind, where it is processed, evaluated, and accorded an appropriate response. These 5 senses then transmit their sensing to the mind, which is then computed through the brain, through the mind. Yeah? And the relative responses are then relayed, where it is processed, evaluated, and accorded. An appropriate response is received from the brain or the mind. But the mind can deal with the impressions it receives in different ways, governed the first place by the manner in which it attends to them. When the mind adverts to the incoming data carelessly, the unwise consideration, the sense or objects tend to stir up unwholesome states. Well, there you go. They do this either directly through their immediate impact or else indirectly by depositing memory traces which later may swell up as the objects of defiled thoughts, images, and fantasies. As a general rule, the defilement that is activated corresponds to the object. Attractive objects provide desire. Disagreeable objects provide ill will. And indeterminate objects provoke the defilements connected with delusion. A bit to remember there, a bit to go over, a bit to listen to again. There's a lot of information being thrown at you, but it's all worthwhile, I can assure you. Since an uncontrolled response to the sensory input stimulates the latent defilements, what is evidently needed to prevent them from arising is control over the senses. Because the senses is where the defilements are sparked, where they receive the messages. And so, if we can control our sense organs, the tastes, the smell, the hearing, the seeing, the touching, the feeling. And we can control all those. If we can bring those into control, then the defilements will weaken. Eventually they'll weaken because they're not receiving any adverse sensing. This is the whole thing. Yeah? Buddha's got a method. He's got a very clear path for us. He's giving he gave us all this knowledge 2,500 years ago for our benefit. Yeah? To assist us towards liberation. As a general rule, the defilement that is activated corresponds to the object. Attractive objects provoke desire. Provoke desire. So anything attractive will provoke desire within the mind. Disagreeable objects provoke ill will. Something you disagree with, will provoke ill will. And indeterminate objects provoke the defilements connected with delusion. Well, there we go. Since an uncontrolled response to the sensory input stimulates the latent defilements, what is evidently needed to prevent them from arising is control over the senses. There you go, see? If we can get those senses into control, wow, are we on a winner? You're on a winner. You're on a winner towards achieving liberation. Thus, the Buddha teaches us the discipline for keeping the hindrances in check, and an exercise called the restraint of the sense faculties. There's an exercise called the restraint of the sense faculties. When he perceives a form with the eye, a sound with the ear, an odor with the nose, a taste with the tongue, an impression with the body, or an object with the mind, he apprehends neither the sign nor the particulars, and he strives to ward off that through which evil and unwholesome states, greed and sorrow would arise. If he remained with unguarded senses, there we go. You always have to keep your senses in guard. Be mindful of what's happening with regards to your senses. And he watches over his senses, restrains his senses. Yeah, restraint. Restraint is a big thing when it comes to the senses. Restraint of the senses does not mean denial of the senses, retreating into a total withdrawal from the sensory world. This is impossible, and even if it could be achieved, the real problem would be, there's a comment coming up, the real problem would be still not to be solved, for the defilements lie in the mind, not in the sense organs or objects. The key to sense control is indicated by the phrase, not apprehending the sign or the particulars. The sign, nimitta, that's a Pali word for it, is the object's general appearance insofar as this appearance is grasped as the basis for the defiled thoughts. The particulars are its less conspicuous features. If sense control is lacking, the mind roams recklessly over the sense fields. First, it grasps the sign, which sets the defilements into motion. Then it explores the particulars, which permits them to multiply and thrive. And this is what happens, right? This is what happens. To restrain the sense senses requires that mindfulness and clear understanding be applied to the encounter with the sense of fields. Sense consciousness occurs in a series as a sequence of monetary cognitive acts, each having its own special task. The initial stages in the series occur as automatic functions. First, the mind adverts to the object, then apprehends it, then admits the precept, examines it, and identifies it. Immediately following the identification, a space opens up in which there occurs a free evaluation of the object, leading to the choice of a response. When mindfulness is absent, the latent defilements, pushing for an opportunity to emerge, will motivate a wrong consideration. One will grasp the sign of the object, explore its details, and thereby give the defilements their opportunity. On account of greed, one will become fascinated by an agreeable object. By an agreeable object. On account of greed, one will become fascinated by an agreeable object. On account of aversion, one will be repelled by a disagreeable object. But when one applies mindfulness to the sensory encounter, one nips the cognitive process in the bud before it can evolve into the stages that stimulate the dormant taints. The dormant taints. So all those defilements are all dormant. They need activation. And once they're activated, they can cause a lot of harm, a lot of problems. But with mindfulness, you can control the response to a sense, whatever you're sensing, through the five sense organs. You can control it. And because you can control it through mindfulness, you weaken the defilements. They're no longer being fed because you're controlling them with your mindfulness of what's being sensed. It's a method given to us by the Buddha. What a great method. What a great pathway. Mindfulness holds the hindrances in check by keeping the mind at the level of what is sensed. It rivets awareness on the given, preventing the mind from embellishing the datum with ideas born of greed, aversion, and delusion. Then, with this loosened awareness as a guide, the mind can proceed to comprehend the object as it is, without being led astray. And there you go, see? It brings us to the end of part 1. Part 1 of the great endeavors. To prevent the arising of unarisen, unwholesome states. The Buddha has just given us the formula in how to control those unarisen, unwholesome states. The Buddha has just given us, in essence, it's the application of being mindful of what's being sensed. So if you're mindful of what's being sensed, then you're not going to awaken those defilements that are dormant, that are waiting for a response. They are waiting for you to awaken them, those dormant defilements, those delusions within the mind. And so the Buddha has given us a perfect formula, a perfect way, methodology to eradicate those defilements. How do you eradicate those defilements? How do you combat them? How do you remove them from your mind? Those delusions, all that drowsiness and dullness that's embedded within your mind. How do you eradicate them? How do you remove them? What do you do? Well, this is a method. See, the Buddha has given us this perfect method in dealing with those defilements. So, that was a very good reading. So until we embark on the next item, which is going to be the next endeavor, the second endeavor, to abandon the arisen unwholesome states. To abandon the arisen unwholesome states. The first one was to deal with or to prevent the arising of unarisen unwholesome states. To prevent through mindfulness that we just discussed, right? We're going to get on to abandon the arisen unwholesome states, which will be the next reading. And so if you enjoyed this reading, if you enjoyed listening to it as much as I've enjoyed reading it, please subscribe to my channel. And until next time, when we embark on the next item, the next endeavor, if you want to call it, it's the next great endeavor, to abandon the arisen unwholesome states. Will be very interesting. What do we do? What's the method given to us by the Buddha? How do we abandon? They've already arisen, so how do we abandon those arisen unwholesome states? What do we do about it? There we go. We're on the verge of finding out. So hopefully hopefully you'll be listening to that next. And until then, have a great day and stay safe.